Today, I'm going to talk about video settings. I'm going to talk about it with reference to my Nikon Z cameras, but it should apply to a lot of you out there interested in shooting video. And I'll put a special focus on audio and also external power. What video settings should I be using? I know there's a ton of you wondering that. I get lots of emails with questions about video settings, both for filming yourself in a vlog-like setting like I'm doing right now, or just out in the field. Maybe you see something beautiful, some beautiful wildlife scene unfolding in front of you, and you really want to capture it in video. It's something that we're all able to do now that our cameras are getting better and better and better at hybrid shooting both stills and video. So I thought it's something that I should address quickly. I'm going to talk about the video settings that I like to use, both to film myself and out in the field. You know, you don't need this entire setup here. This really helps me with doing the kind of work that I do. I'm actually filming this right now with my Z50 with nothing but my Sony lav mic setup plugged into it. So I just got the scene set up and I'm trusting that its face detect and eye detect autofocus is going to keep me in focus wherever I happen to be. Normally, I use this setup when I'm in the studio where I can actually see myself and make sure that everything's going all right. So if anything's going haywire, I won't even know it right now. We'll talk about how I set up both out in the field and in the studio. I want to thank everybody first for supporting this channel, for bringing me all the kinds of questions that drive the content like this, for sharing these videos with your friends and liking and subscribing to the channel. There's always a subscribe button down there in the bottom right. And I thank everybody who's been clicking on that. We've had a large increase in subscribers over the last year, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you all. I want to remind everybody that we're doing a free office hours this Tuesday. I believe it's February 2nd, if I'm remembering correctly, but the first Tuesday in February, 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll be on Zoom for the first 100 people that sign up, and also on YouTube Live. You can choose your platform when you sign up. You can also submit a macro image. We talked about macro photography a week and a half ago in our last office hours, and so I asked everybody to submit images. We'll go through, we'll take a look at those images, and we'll take general questions about photography. Also, I've got a project. We've filled up the first section. There's a number of people on the waiting list. If we get a few more, we might run a second section, and that's kicking off here in February. If you're interested in that, just run over to my website, hudsonhenry.com/projects, and the office hours are at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. All right, enough of the announcements. Let's talk video. I've always been a big time-lapse shooter, and I've done more and more video as we started to have live view in our DSLRs and the ability to flip up that mirror and shoot video. But then once the mirrorless revolution really took hold, the Z cameras were a revelation to me with how easy it is to shoot video. Now the settings I'm going to talk about should be relatively universal, whether you're shooting Canon or Fuji or Sony or whatever. These are going to be good guidelines for you to set up when you're shooting video. So I want to talk just kind of basically about settings. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do set up to do the kind of vlogging that I do with this setup. And then I want to go into a little more in depth about the most complicated thing that you do in video, which is actually the audio component if you want to have good audio. Video is pretty easy. Audio gets complicated. So whether I'm shooting handheld out in the field or on a fluid head out in the field, or whether I'm setting up my camera to work in here in the studio, I have some general kind of default settings that I like to use. You know, first of all, I'm in manual mode in my camera. I don't have auto ISO turned on. I am in a manual ISO, manual mode. I lock in that shutter speed and aperture. I don't want the camera changing exposure during the film because it's going to look weird, it's going to look jerky. Suddenly you're going to have darkening and brightening of your image in the video, and that just really looks unprofessional. When it comes to the video settings that I tend to use, I'm going to keep that stuff when I'm in video mode, and I'm going to just show you in the Nikon world, but it should be pretty applicable to whatever you're using. I like to shoot in 4K. Even if I'm going to have my end use be at 1080, the video is going to look better if I shoot it in 4K. Now there's probably truth to that too. If you were to shoot in 8K and down res to 4K, if you've got plenty of processing power and plenty of storage space, there's no problem with that at all. I'm going to be shooting in general for myself. My favorite is this 2160 at 24 frames a second. There's kind of two standards in the Western world, 24 frames a second and 30 frames a second. 24 frames a second is more the filmic look, Hollywood theater style look. It's how many frames are being captured per second. 30 frames a second is more broadcast television standard. I like the filmic look personally. If I'm shooting something that's really fast action, like skiing or kiteboarding or something super fast action, then sometimes I might want to shoot it a little faster, 60 frames a second, and then when you play that back at 24 frames a second, it just looks smoother when there's fast moving action. There's all these rules are kind of made to be broken, but I would say start with 24 frames a second, have a look at what that looks like, make sure it looks good to you. Now, there are picture modes that are a lot like you would be using when you're choosing how a JPEG is rendered in your camera. And at least in Nikon land, I tend to like the natural EN-EL, neutral, I think actually is neutral. And neutral just gives you a nice neutral kind of, doesn't do too much sharpening, doesn't do too much color saturation. It's kind of a nice, even, middle of the road setting. And then you can do a little bit of color grading in post. Now remember, video is highly compressed, so you're not going to be able to work on it like you can with RAW files. You can't pull all the shadow detail you're used to with a still. You can't get those highlights back like you might be able to with a still. It's very, very compressed. You're going to hear a lot about ProRes RAW shooting, 10-bit shooting, N-Log, S-Log, all these different kinds of log shooting. That's all kind of higher end stuff, gets you more dynamic range, more ability to do color grading in post-production, but it's also just more advanced stuff in general. You're going to need to know how to go in and do that kind of color grading and making those tones look right when you shoot with RAW. You're also going to use a ton of storage space. You almost need an external hard drive running to pick up all the video. You know, I would suggest as you're getting started in video, just shoot it at 4K or even 1080. It looks beautiful on a big television at 1080. 4K looks beautiful on a Hollywood screen. Shoot it at its normal 8-bit mode, and then you can go ahead and shoot it in more of your neutral kind of a picture mode, or practice with some of the other picture modes. If you don't want to do color grading, maybe you'll find something that really looks good to you. But you want to lock that in and set it, as well as your white balance. When I'm shooting here in the studio, I actually use a gray card. I have this spider checker that I tend to use my preset white balance. I'll go into white balance and I'll choose, there's all the different temperature, Kelvin, whatever. With the preset white balance, if I just hold my OK key down for the Nikon, it opens up a box and I just hold the chart over it. And when I press the OK button again, it measures that color temperature. And then I just press the info key again and boom, it's locked in. That's how I tend to white balance. If I'm out in the field, if there's someone with a white shirt, you can do that. If you've got a color checker with you in the fields, you can do that. You can also just sort of say, oh, it's a sunny day, and go into the sunny white balance, or cloudy if you want to warm things up a little bit. Just find the white balance that looks right, because you're not going to be able to change it after the fact like you would with a RAW photo. The last thing I'm going to talk about is audio, and I actually want to talk about some revolutions in audio that I've come across lately that's really helped and made it easier for me to do the vlogging that I do. So I'm going to talk about audio in a completely separate section here. That's kind of the last piece that you need. You want to have your in-body image stabilization turned on. If you have image stabilization on your lens turned on, you'll just be amazed at how it lets you, if you're hand holding, hold nice and still while you're working with your video. I like to go into the display mode where I actually see, oops, I'm still in, let me get out of here. If I go into the display mode where I can actually see sort of a level, it's almost like an aircraft level, so that I can make sure I have a visual reference to whether it looks like I'm level or not. Whether I'm looking through the viewfinder with a mirrorless or whether I'm looking at the live view on a DSLR or mirrorless, that really, really helps me out when I'm shooting video handheld. Staying level is key. Again, that's another reason why I personally don't use ball heads anymore. There's a whole lot of reasons why ball heads are something that I very, very rarely use. But the beauty shooting video with a fluid head is that the fluid slows your motion down, lets you make nice filmic moves that are smooth and the same speed with soft and easy starts and stops. And it keeps you level no matter what you do. You can tilt, you can pan, or you can even pan and tilt at the same time. Super, super handy when you're shooting video to have a fluid head. So all right, that's about it for settings. External power, you run through a lot of power because you have live view running, the sensor's hot all the time. With the newer cameras like the Z6 II and Z7 II and the Sonys, and I know the new Canons are the same way, you can just plug USB power directly into it. I don't know what the specs are for all the cameras. You have to check how many watts you need. I know that for Nikon, 15 watts and above will power the camera. You have to have, I'm going to link all the stuff I'm talking about, but you need to have a good enough cable. This is an Anchor cable that I use that can carry that much power, actually can carry more than 4 times that much power. And I love to use these little external battery banks. This is about the equivalent of 4 Nikon standard batteries, and I can just hang it in its little bag off of my tripod and plug the camera into it. When I'm here in the studio, I plug it directly into a little Anchor power pack that plugs into the wall, and I just run an extension cord to it, and it actually has multiple ports where it can charge other things, but it has a power delivery port, so does this little battery. I'm going to link both those guys in the video's description along with the other cables and things that I talk about when I talk about vlogging and my setup for vlogging. And so all that stuff is there in my links. And I'll also put a link section for video and vlogging in my main links page at hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. Okay, hang on. One thing I just totally forgot, and I can hear people pinging me for it right now, is focus. How do you deal with focus in video? And that's an evolving thing. So you've got a lot of choices when you're shooting video on how to focus, whether to use autofocus, whether to use manual focus. And I will tell you, from having worked on some documentaries in the past and working with a filmmaker in this studio regularly when we're not in COVID times, that manual focus is really what all the pro video shooters are doing. I would suggest that for most of your applications, when you're out shooting yourself in the field, you use manual focus, activate focus peaking in your camera, and just try to keep locked on your subject, practice at it. It's kind of old school. It's easier with the mirrorless by far than it was with the DSLRs. The fact that you can be looking through the camera, getting that nice isolated view and focusing. Now, if you're filming a interview, or someone personally, myself right now, I'm shooting with my Z50. Anytime I'm working with the Z cameras, filming myself, I turn on face and eye detect autofocus, and I put it in AFF. That's the continuous, you don't have to touch a button, it's just always autofocusing. Whether I move close, whether I move back, it stays locked on my face and my eyes. And that's great if you're photographing a subject that's, say in an interview situation where they're looking at you. The camera can make those decisions and you can just run the interview without worrying about autofocus. You can also tap a subject and use subject tracking. I would just suggest, given whatever camera system you're working with, that if you find your autofocus hunting and seeking, just know your video was destroyed at that moment. If something special is happening, I think you're better off smoothly, slowly focusing. You don't want to do a lot of zooming when you're filming, and you don't want to do a lot of focusing in and out quickly, like an autofocus does when it's seeking. So you have to kind of test your equipment, know how well it works in different situations, trust it where you know you can, and manually focus where you know you can't. Another thing people ask about is exposure. You don't get the same kind of exposure meter shooting video that you do when you're shooting a photo. So I tend to, when I'm setting up my exposure, my initial exposure, I'll jump into the histogram view. As you go through your display modes, whatever camera brand you're working with, you'll find there's a histogram view, and that histogram will give you a live view of what you're seeing on the screen. Also, turning on the zebra stripes mode in your settings, in your movie settings in your camera, will have sort of a flashing cartoonish zebra stripe section anytime you blow highlights out on the screen. That's really easy for the filmmaker to see. And the minute you start seeing that happen too much in your scene, you think, I need to shut down this clip, readjust my exposure so I'm not blowing out the highlights if I don't mean to be blowing out the highlights, and then restart the next clip. All right, so let's talk quickly about my vlogging setup here. You see I've got a bigger fluid head than the one back there that I'm normally using. This is the original fluid head. It's like one that I used filming a documentary on Denali where I absolutely fell in love with fluid heads, and I actually did haul this around with me on Denali and on multiple projects, and for years I even carried it on remote mountain trails in Patagonia until I discovered through my good friend Andy Adkins, the filmmaker, the Manfrotto 500 AH, which is so much smaller and lighter and better suited to our type of video. So I used the big old Sackler FSB7, which is much more expensive, much heavier, nicer in some ways for video in my studio environment. So either any fluid head will work for this. You could even, for the studio setup, a ball head will work. You're not doing movements and things. Fluid heads are really essential for movements. You can see I've got my Z6 II mounted in a small rig cage. That's just a little aluminum cage. I'll put a link to that in the video's description. They're not horrifically expensive. You just pop your L bracket off the camera, mount the small rig cage in there, and it gives you all kinds of ports to attach things. I got a little handle which I can carry the whole rig by if I take it off the tripod, and if I wanted to go around filming, it's a nice way. It's got mounts for external microphones or our audio recording equipment, monitors, external recorders, all kinds of stuff. It's very, very modular. You can put handles on it, like I've got one here on the left. I've already talked about the fact that I have this plugged into an Anchor power source that has power delivery, has over 15 volts of power delivery, or 15 watts of power delivery, so it'll power the camera and keep the battery topped off at all times. I never have to worry about running out of battery when I'm in the studio. I have my audio connected into the mic inline. When I'm setting up audio, I've shown you, I keep a set of headphones. I've got some noise canceling Sony headphones here, plugged into the camera to monitor, as I showed you a little bit earlier. And essentially, that's it. Now, one thing that's really important, when I'm running, I've got this 7-inch, it's a funny name, it's actually called a Feel World monitor. I'll put a link to these. I think there's a newer model than this. They run on these simple little Sony N batteries, really, really common, affordable batteries, come in all different sizes. It eats quite a bit of power. You need a big one to last for a while. But the nice thing is, if I turn this on and have it facing me when I'm doing my video work, and I flip the camera on, well then all of a sudden I get to see what the camera's seeing. So you're seeing the Z50 there with the Sony mic pickup on it right now. I can see whether I'm in focus, I can see whether something's wrong in the video. It even gives me an audio feed reading in that scale on the left side. So that's really handy for film work. This is not a recorder. I also have an Atomos Ninja 5 which lets me record ProRes RAW or N-Log 10-bit video. Those things I was talking about that are a little more complicated. The Nikons will output that higher quality video, that more raw style video that requires a lot of work in post-production through HDMI to that external recorder. It's much smaller and it's harder to see myself with when I'm doing vlogging. This is a lot cheaper, really lets me see myself nicely while I'm vlogging in the studio space. And when I'm looking at that screen, I'm pretty much looking at the lens, so it's not distracting for you having me look off to some external monitor to a side. I like to keep it right near the lens here. That's basically it for vlogging. As I said before, I go into my autofocus mode. I'm going to be in, for the Nikon people, and I'm sure you have an equivalent for your Sony or for your Canon or your Fuji or whatever camera you're working with. AFF is a full-time autofocus. That's in video only mode. It's not available in stills mode, but that keeps the camera focusing all the time. It's constantly active whether you're hitting a button or not. And then I use auto area autofocus, and this happens to be my Z6 II. I'm using it with eye detect. Actually, I want it with people on. Right now I had it without people, but I want it with people so that it's looking for eyes and faces to keep locked in focus. That's basically all there is to my video settings. Aside from what I said before, I'm going to, in the studio space, I'm going to adjust my exposure based on the histogram. I'm going to adjust my audio. I'm going to make sure that I've got that focusing mode on, and then I can see whether it's in focus on the monitor. Make sure my audio levels are good and sound good. Hit record, talk to the camera just like I'm doing now. All right, so for audio, I want to talk to you a little bit about the different methods that you can choose to use audio. We're going to talk about just using the camera's in-camera microphone with an automatic setting, just so that as you're talking to it, it's going to pick up the audio from the room and go straight into the camera. We're going to talk about a shotgun mic. I've got a Rode NTG powered shotgun mic that we'll test. And then we're going to talk about lav mics like I'm using right now. I'm using a Sony, but I'm going to show you a really cool new tiny rechargeable one from Hollyland that I'm kind of shifting over to using that I absolutely adore. And I'll tell you kind of a fun story about that along the way. So first off, I wanted to show you, if I'm going to go into my audio settings, I'm going to jump in to my iMenu here, and it's right there, that little microphone setting when you're in the movie mode. You're going to run over. I'm going to just flip it into auto mode. I have nothing plugged into the camera, and let's test how that sounds. Actually, let's test how that sounds, and then I'll do some adjustments. The way I would do adjustments is I'm going to plug in an external microphone, and I would put headphones on with those plugged into the camera's headphone input, and then I can hear how this is sounding. So I can look at the levels, and if I was to, right now I hear nothing in my headphones. As I boost this up, I start to hear myself in the headphones, and as I'm going up, I can see the little audio output readout on the microphone scale. Right now, I'm going into yellow, not quite hitting into red. If I shout, it'll touch red there. And that's saying level 12, where I happen to be standing at the moment, maybe level 13, I'm going to adjust it, right? So if I'm using, say, a lav mic on a person, I'm going to set them up, I'm going to put the headphones on, listen to them talking, even if it's me. I want to hear whether I'm blowing out, I want to hear where it sounds good, I want to hear whether I'm picking up background sounds from outside or not. Listening on your headphones and adjusting using the levels is going to be really important. You tend to get much worse audio in the auto setting. So what I'm going to show you right now is no microphone at all, just using the camera's internal mics with automatic. Then we're going to adjust a shotgun mic for me, and then we'll do a couple of different lav mics, including the new ones that I love, and I'll share with you. They're just a screaming deal, and they're awesome, and they're easy to use, and they let you record 2 people at once and mix them together. All right, so this is the Z6 II, this is the Z6 II, onboard mics, automatic, no microphone on board for me. I still have this lav mic from Sony, but it's not connected to that camera. It's connected to this camera. All right, this is the Rode shotgun mic mounted up to the Z6 II, Z6 II, Z6 II, and audio adjusted to level 10, watching the meter and listening to the headphones. All right, so this is my Sony UTX B03 radio frequency lav mic. You probably hear a hiss. I've found ways to mitigate that. It's because of the audio preamps on the cameras that I'm using. And I've found ways to run it through an external preamp before it comes into the camera and turning the camera's preamp way down. Kind of a pain in the butt though. Not something I'd recommend for everyone. One channel of audio, one person at a time. Relatively expensive. A lot of batteries, 4 AA batteries. But, still, nice close range sound. You get rid of a lot of background noise. The closer the microphone is to your mouth, the better the audio is generally going to be when you're doing dialogue between people. Now, let me show you something really, really cool that's made my life a lot easier and is cheaper, and just a really neat thing I'd recommend to anybody just kind of getting into recording themselves and vlogging. All right, so this is the Hollyland Lark 150, just direct into the camera. I wind up turning the camera's preamp only up to about 6 as compared to like 16 with the Sonys, and so it doesn't need as much amplification. It has a built-in little onboard mic, no wires, or you can run it as a wired lav. I'll show you what it sounds like with a wired lav mic into it in just a second, but pretty amazing. I'm going to show you this little kit. It all comes in this box, actually 2 mics, so you can have a conversation with someone and tune the conversation between the 2 people. It'll record in mono or stereo. It comes with dead cat wind protectors, and this little box has a built-in battery that charges the receiver and both microphones while it's in your camera bag for hours and hours and hours of use, and you just recharge the box via USB-C. Pretty cool stuff, and the audio output is amazing. It's small, it's light, it's much more affordable, and it lets you record 2 people having a conversation at the same time without amplifying it as much in camera and getting a better quality sound result. I'm absolutely loving it. All right, so before I delve in and tell you more of the ins and outs of this little wireless mini lav mic system, this is just the sound of it outputting through this Rode lav mic. This is a Rode Go. I'll put links to all this stuff again in the video's description. You click on the title, you click show more. And yeah, so this is how it sounds running into the Z6. No in-between audio preamp. This is just direct into the camera. All right, so for those of you who maybe don't have an entire studio set up and you're interested in getting people's interviews or voices in the field or even recording your own voice, I think what I just demonstrated is that speaking from a distance towards a microphone set to pick up everything in the world, you know, from any direction, like what's in the on-camera mics, is a really, really bad way to do it because it picks up every car sound or leaf blowing or everything from a great distance. A shotgun mic, that focuses its sound pattern right towards the subject out in front. It's a little bit better. But having a microphone right on you that's close to your mouth, it lets it just pick up things that are close and let the rest of the stuff sort of fall off. A lav mic for dialogue is really, really nice in the kind of blogging, vlogging work that I do, and if you're wanting to pick up someone's voice when you're recording out in the field. I've been teasing this Hollyland Lark 150 thing. It's kind of a funny story. I actually got hit up out of the blue from this company, Hollyland, wanting me to do a review. They had this whole thing set up where they're like, you know, well, we'll pay you to do a review, blah, 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 blah. And my response was, I don't do paid reviews. I will try out your gear. If I really like it, I will put it out there to my audience. If I don't, I'll send it back to you and tell you why not. They said that's not usual for them, but sure, okay. So I signed nothing. They sent me this little box. And when it came, I thought, well, this is just too small and tiny to be possible that it's any good. But I was really, really shocked. And I've been using it for the last, I don't know, 6 weeks of ATS, something like that. It's got a charging box, a lot like a Bluetooth headphone set. This box has a big battery in it that you charge the box, and then the box, each one of these little guys has a contact in it. And when you plug them in, the box charges all the gear. When you turn it on while they're in the box, the receiver, this bigger piece in the middle, gives you a readout of how much charge is left in the box, how much charge is left in the left transmitter, the right transmitter, and the receiver. And you can fit your little cord that you would plug from the receiver into the camera. It's got a line out and it's got a headphone jack to monitor what the audio coming into it sounds like. So you plug your line out and plug it into the microphone port on your camera, slide this little clip. This little clip can clamp to something, or it's set to slide right into a hot shoe. It's a cold shoe on the small rig. And then the minute that you take out one of these microphones, you don't even have to push a button. They just automatically link right up to the receiver. You get a battery readout. You get a digital display. You can adjust the decibel level up or down just by turning this little dial. You can say I want to reduce it by a decibel or 2 decibels or 3 decibels. And literally, just by plugging this thing onto your lapel where you'd normally put a microphone, it has a really nice built-in mic. I talked about it just a second ago. You can also, as I said, plug in a lav mic. The lav mic that comes with it isn't really worth me showing you. It has enough noise that it's worse than using the Sonys and the preamp and the other camera. It's just not the best quality lav mic. That's the one downer to this system. But there's a whole bunch of companies making good lav mics out there. This is a Rode Go lav mic. I'll put a link to it in the video's description. Works great with this system. You heard it a second ago. If you need a smaller thing than this to plug in, so you want to clip it in the tip of a t-shirt, this is a little bit big. But this thing works great. So I was really, really surprised, and it has such a nice, clean output at such a high level, you don't need to amplify it very much, and therefore the audio preamps in your camera don't need to be quite as good, and therefore that's the one thing that kind of bums me out about Nikon's Z6 and Z7, and it's slightly improved in the Z6 II and the Z7 II, but still not by any means perfect. The audio preamps are a little bit noisy. This thing helps with that because you can leave the levels really low. It also comes with a little dead cat that plugs in to the microphone port and just covers that microphone with a little wind-proof dead cat. I took it out on a kiteboarding trip on the river a few weeks ago just to kind of test how that worked. All right, so just a quick check of how this thing handles the wind with its built-in little dead cat. My crazy little kiteboard crew, we like to get a day in every single month of the year. So this is December on the Columbia River near the Portland airport. And the thing that I think is really the coolest is that you can take both these guys out, put one on yourself, put one on someone else. You can use lab mics, you can use the dead cats, plug it in, have a conversation. And if you plug your headphones in, monitor your audio levels, you can either record left channel, right channel, so the left person's on the left, the right person's on the right. You can record it mono where they're both on both channels. And you can mix the audio from 2 mics into this one receiver, all from this little kit that recharges itself through the box. I find that these last maybe an hour and a half each. So if you're recording yourself, you get 3 hours of recording. If you're recording 2 people, you get an hour and a half. They charge pretty quick in about 45 minutes, and this box will charge them about 4 times. So you wind up with a whole lot of recording potential doing this. And the way that you can turn each one up and down with a simple knob on the receiver, so you can mix people. If one person's voice is louder than the other, you can turn them down, turn the other person up just a little bit right on the receiver. I tested it with my little boy Pike here in the studio just to see how it worked.
What's on top of it?
That's the microphone receiver. So you and I each have a microphone. You're wearing yours right here, and I got mine right here, right? Real obvious, it's like inside my shirt. And those pick up our voices, and that's taking a video of us, and it goes through and records what you and I are both saying.
Why? How does it go to the camera?
Through the air.
What?
Yeah. It's the same way like how we get internet on our phone.
How does it go through the air? So it's a magnet?
It has a magnet. Yep, it does.
I'll show you something. So the things just go right next to each other, they go in here and here.
When we're done, I'll show you how they fit in there. You put them in there and they start charging. It says charging.
What?
It says charging.
Mine does?
When you put it inside there. So like if I
says charging.
If I took your microphone off, suddenly you'd stop having all the great sound that you have. But if I put it in this box like this, probably making a horrible amount of noise on our video right now. But if I put it in here, it'll start charging. Now your voice is gone. Say something.
Okay.
So you see now it's not working very well. What do you think?
Daddy.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too.
I wish Pepper was here.
Well, what do you think we ought to go do now?
Go get her. It's just boring.
All right. Fair enough. Give me a kiss. I love you. Let's go do something fun. So it's really cool stuff. I am super impressed, and I picture myself rolling forward with these for the foreseeable future. I love particularly for going on the road because it's so small, it's so lightweight. Everything fits in this little recharging case. You just close it up, plug it in to USB. You're set to go for the entire trip. Again, I'm putting links to all this stuff in the description. I got to say, this is the rare occasion where somebody kind of cold calls me about a new product, and I say, I'll check it out, and then, holy cow, it's way nicer than I anticipated, and I wind up saying, yes, of course, I'll review it. And they're nice enough to let me keep it, so, just so you all know, yes, I did get this guy for free, but it's significantly cheaper than the Sonys that I've used. Or the Rode that I used before the Sonys, and the audio output is amazing, and it's just so simple to use. I can't find any reason not to recommend it, other than that the little lav mic that comes with it isn't the best. I just recommend you upgrade that one piece. So for those of you who stuck around, anybody who's a Nikon aficionado, I got one more little cool tip I just discovered. I've been talking so much about auxiliary battery output or input, so you can put a power line into the camera and run it indefinitely off USB-C power. Some people pointed out that only works with the latest 2 versions of the Nikon EN-EL15 battery. Nikon stays really true to its customers by using the same battery as long as they can, body to body to body to body to body. So my Nikon D810, D850, D500, Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II all will run off the same batteries, but the ones that came with the 850 and the Z6 and the Z7 are the EN-EL15B. The ones that came with the new Z6 II and Z7 II are EN-EL15Cs. And to redo that auxiliary charging through the USB-C port, you need to have a B or a C. The original EN-EL15s or the EN-EL15As that came in between those and the Bs won't work for that. So I went looking online because I have a lot of the old original A's and original, no designation, no letter designation at all. And I found these BM replacement batteries for EN-EL15C. They have the same number of milliamps exactly as the Nikon battery. I've been testing them. They work great. They charge. They run the Z6 II and the Z7 II. 2 of them are less than $30, where the Nikon ones are $70. So, if you want to buy the Nikon brand, it's great to support them. I bought 6 of these, and so I'm well provisioned for times where I can't use external power on the road, and also all of them will charge in the camera if I just plug in the USB battery pack to the camera while it's in the bag. So, all right, that's a quick tip for everybody. I hope everybody's getting out there, getting some photos taken, staying safe through this period before everybody in the world gets vaccinated. I can't wait to get vaccinated. My wife's a doctor. She got vaccinated a couple of weeks ago. I'm jealous. I can't wait to get traveling, taking photos, running workshops, being collaborative with people, and I know all of you feel the same way. Cuba is up and live on my workshops page. You go to hudsonhenry.com/workshops. You can sign up for Cuba. Cuba is in November. I'm going to very, very soon be setting up workshops in Yellowstone, the Tetons, and Moab in October. We're looking at a Southern Oregon coast workshop in September, early September. Lots of fun stuff about to happen. Costa Rica is going to be another one this summer. There's only a couple spots in Cuba. It's mostly people that got shifted from the one that we had to cancel. Remember, everyone, we've got office hours Tuesday. This next Tuesday, I believe it's February 2nd. It's the first Tuesday in February. We're going to be talking about macro photographs that people have submitted. Submit your macro photographs. Submit your questions. We'll do general Q&A. Rick, Woody, Darren, and I. It's going to be the general gang, David. So thanks, everybody, so much for watching. Stay safe, stay creative. We'll see you next week.